Our next presentation will be remote. It will be from Mathieu Rolland, who is working at the French National Reference Laboratory, ANSES. He has started there in 2016 as the deputy head of the unit coordination of reference activity, and now he is the head of the virology team. And before that, during 6 years, he worked in GVS in France also. And today he's going to speak to us about one of the subjects of our group discussions, the optimization of proficiency test assessment.
Good morning. Indeed, I'm going to present some work done on the optimization of proficiency assessment. This work was done in the framework of the ValiTest project, which took place from 2018 until 2021, and the project gathered 16 different partners. So the main objective of this project was to improve the reliability of the diagnostic activity, and to do so we worked on the validation of diagnostic tests, but also on the improvement of the validation framework. And since you can only reach a reliable diagnostic activity if the validated tests are used by proficient users, we decided to dedicate a work package on the optimization of proficiency assessment. So, a few words about the context. The current approach of proficiency assessment is based on regular proficiency tests for each combination of method, matrix, and Pest. However, we all know that laboratories have to analyze many different pests on many different matrices, and we all have limited resources. So this approach is not sustainable with the resources available in the different laboratories. In the framework of the project, we had three main objectives. The first one was to identify possible horizontal proficiency tests, and we wanted to work on the applicability of such an approach and on the needs of the laboratories. Then we wanted to consult accreditation bodies to see if they would accept such an approach. And the idea was to finalize this work by the preparation of some guidelines. So first, I'm going to talk about the applicability and the identification of some critical points. To do so, we started by having a discussion during an EPPO workshop back in 2019 in Paris. EPPO accepted to dedicate half a day with diagnostics and quality assurance experts to brainstorm by groups of expertise. So we considered the different factors listed in the ISO 17025 and in the EPPO PM 784 as determining the correctness and the reliability of a test. So these factors correspond to human factors, the accommodation, the test methods, the equipment, and so on. And so we asked the different experts from their point of view to which extent these different factors would contribute to the uncertainty. And in more details, we asked them for each method and test if they would consider that a valid result obtained during a proficiency test would be valid for a different test. For example, if they had a valid result using an ELISA, would it be valid for any other ELISA? Would it be valid also for a molecular assay? Would it be valid for any assay in the same field, for example, in bacteriology? Or would they even consider that obtaining a valid result is valid for any method across the different fields? So asking all these different questions in all the different fields, bacteriology, virology, nematology, and so on, we ended up with quite a large and complex matrix, which can be actually summarized by a quite simple table. So when we asked these questions to the experts, their answer was that some factors are actually not under the scope of a proficiency test. It would be the case for the test method, for the sampling and the reference material. But for many others, like the accommodation, the equipment, measurement, traceability, and handling, obtaining a valid result during a proficiency tests could demonstrate that you're proficient when you have to, measure the traceability or the handling, and this would be true for any other PT across the different fields. But it would not be the case for the human factor. It would be the case for molecular and serological assays. In this case, they considered that a result would be valid across field. But for methods like isolation, morphology, or bioassay, they considered that obtaining a valid result during a PT is only valid for the test you've been using during this proficiency test. The second action we took was to try to identify the needs of the laboratories. And to do so, we addressed a survey to all the laboratories of the EPPO database on diagnostic expertise. So we collected results on all the different methods in all the different fields. I'm just presenting the results obtained in bacteriology. You can see here the different pests considered and the different methods. There is a color code. Green means that there is no demand, and red means that there is high demand. We can see that there is actually in bacteriology a demand for all the different methods. It was not the case in virology, for example. The needs were more focused on molecular and serological assays. And you can also see that there was, by the time we did this survey, a demand for Xylella, for Ralstonia, but also Clavibacter and Candidatus liberibacter. We also asked several questions to the different laboratories. You can see here in green the proportion of laboratories answering yes to the different questions, and in orange the proportion answering no. There was actually quite a strong agreement of laboratories when we asked them if they considered that the proficiency approach should be considered as a multi-year and multidisciplinary plan designed to last 3 to 4 years and to cover all the needs of laboratories. They also agreed to say that the proficiency test plan should include emerging tests as soon as validated tests are available, and that samples should be as similar as possible to routine samples. Then we had more balanced results on some other questions, and there was a strong disagreement when we asked if samples should arrive ready for analysis. For example, if we should just send DNA extracts, plates, or slides. So all these have been summarized and are available in an output of the project, the deliverable 5.1 on the analysis of the needs of the laboratories and the applicability of the horizontal proficiency testing approach. Our next action was to have a consultation of accreditation bodies. The question raised was, is it possible to assess the proficiency of laboratories horizontally? In other words, is a PT result robust from one PT to another using different methods on different tests? There is actually a guidance document published by EA on the level and frequency of proficiency testing participation. This document is based on a risk approach, and it says that laboratories should identify subdisciplines corresponding to groups of sets of measurement techniques on which the outcome of one PT for one of these sets would be directly correlated to the other sets. So we're not starting from scratch. There are already some references, and actually the possibility of having some kind of horizontal assessment of the proficiency of laboratories has already been somehow validated by EA, by European accreditation. So Considering this, and with the different results we had obtained from the previous consultation, we had a discussion with COFRAC, the French accreditation body, and we asked them if they would consider that we can use these collected data to identify analysis groups defined in such a way that a PT result would be valid for all the groups. Actually, we are just asking if we could apply the guidance document from EA. We provided several examples like this one. Would a PT result obtained on a serological test, would it be valid also for other serological tests on other pests and matrices? And their answer, by the time we had this discussion, was no. At that time, they considered that a PT is required for each combination of method, matrix, and pest before the accreditation, but also at least once per accreditation cycle. They considered that each laboratory has to conduct its own risk analysis to design its own PT participation plan, and they would actually accept a limited PT participation, but it would require an enforceable document demonstrating that this would be feasible and that would demonstrate it on the basis of objective data. So when we had this discussion, we thought, well, that could be interesting to try to demonstrate that it's feasible. However, during the course of the project, we had no time and money to produce new data. So we just looked at PT data of a network of laboratories using the French official methods from 2010 until 2019. On the slide, you have an overview of the data collected. However, considering the available data and the identified bias, it was not possible to conclude concerning the robustness of PT results. And to be honest, looking at the data, a non-conforming result looks more like a random event. There is no real pattern in the data we had. So this is still something to be done. Again, all these data and all the analyses done are available in an output of the project, deliverable 5.2, guidelines on an approach to undertake horizontal proficiency testing. But we were not done with the consultation. We also had a discussion with EA. Actually, the guidance document I already talked about includes some case studies on different disciplines like environmental chemistry, microbiology, and so on. But there is nothing on plant health. So the question we asked is, would they consider including such a case study in their document? However, considering the number of disciplines, their answer was that it's not possible to include a specific case study for each. But they did encourage us to build our own case study, and this is exactly what we did. So all the case studies in the document are built and presented the same way. First, you have a list of the accredited testing activities. Then you have considerations for the determination of subdisciplines, explaining how they decided to group the different testing activities. And at the end, you have the resulting subdisciplines. So we decided to prepare a similar document based on the accreditation scopes and analysis offer of ANSES and NIVIP on bacteriology. And actually, when you gather the activities of these two laboratories, you end up with quite a long list of different tests. We are talking about 7 measurement techniques, isolation, IF, real-time PCR, and so on 6 different products, like plant materials, seeds, tubers, water, soil, and substrate. So if you try to present all these activities as a matrix or a table, considering the measurement techniques and the different products, and that you take into account all the different tests, you realize that we are talking about a total of 52 different tests for which the laboratory should, in theory, be accredited. Of course, that's not possible. If we want to lower a little bit this number, we can try not to consider the different products or matrices, and then the numbers goes down to 41. If you want to lower it again, the only option is actually to consider that all these pests are actually bacteria. And then you go down to 20 different tests. And if you want to lower it again, you actually end up considering that the subdisciplines correspond to the 7 different measurement techniques. And you end up with subdisciplines corresponding to the detection of bacteria by isolation, the detection of bacteria by immunofluorescence, and so on. A laboratory willing to produce its own PT participation plan based on these subdisciplines would also have to consider some restrictions. For example, this laboratory would have to participate to one proficiency test. Oui.
Mathieu,
Yep.
une minute, s'il te plaît.
Yeah, I'm done in 30 seconds. So this lab would have to participate to one proficiency test for each subdiscipline, meaning each measurement techniques by accreditation cycle. It would have to evaluate the necessity to undertake PTs specifically covering all the products in the scope on a periodic basis. It would have to participate in PTs covering as many pests as possible during each accreditation cycle, and prioritize the participation in the different PTs, like, for example, taking into account technically challenging analyses. And finally, it would have to elaborate a detailed and duly justified proficiency testing strategy. And it's recommended that this strategy includes a multi-annual PT participation plan covering an accreditation cycle. And this, again, is detailed in an output of the project. And this is it. I'm done for this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mathieu. Are there some questions for Mathieu? Yes, Rebecca.
Thank you for your presentation. Has your lab or any other lab tried to do this scheme with just 7 categories, and was it acceptable for the accreditation body?
Not so far. Well, we are doing like.
Thank you.
Most of the time we are participating to the proficiency tests available, but we did not try to present such subdisciplines to the accreditation bodies.
That would be interesting to see the response.
Okay.
Yes.
So this was an outcome of value test. And unfortunately, so far, we haven't had time to have a detailed discussion with EA on that. But it's on our work program for 23 to organize a discussion with Johan Sitaras, who is the plant health contact person for us, and to present, because when Mathieu was referring to it, we had discussion with people in charge of the EA document on PTs, and they say, yes, the best way is to try to think about similar case studies for plant health that could be then evaluated by EA. So we have been the document has been presented to the panel on diagnostic and quality assurance, and they had no comment on it, so they said we should try it, but again, this has been delayed on, I can take full responsibility on that. So this has been delayed, and it's on our work program of this year.
Adrian?
Just to complete the concept of interest, that's in the veterinary field, not doing it this way, and it's accepted by the accreditation body. believe that it's possible. And we have some laboratories doing the preliminary analysis and contact, so they can manage and present it, I think, in the near future.
Hi Matthew, really interesting talk here from Farah. Given in the questionnaire part of your talk, you said that people thought that the kind of molecular serology stuff would be transferable, that the biological testing wasn't transferable. Do you think that things like isolation and pathogenicity testing can be done at a sub-discipline level in the same way that PCR can?
Well, I'm afraid the sound is not that good. I didn't really catch your question. It was about the transfer from one method to another.
Yes. Yes.
But from which method? To me, all these cases are not the same. It does make sense that, for example, an ELISA test would be valid on other ELISA tests. And I strongly agree with the views of the different experts saying that a bioassay, for example, you cannot consider that since you've managed to do a bioassay, it would work for any other bioassay. Same for isolation and so on. I'm not sure I've answered your question.
That's fine.
He says yes.
Sorry.
Yes, Maria.
Hello with you, Maria Bergman from the Netherlands, NBWA. At that time, when we were working on this case, when we were working on this case study, we indicated also that this might be a very good approach. However, there are several cases where we really need to set up some criteria. For example, the question just raised by Andy is very relevant because we indicated in the discussion we had at that time, but for isolation, for example, you cannot really have an approach where for all kinds of different bacteria, where different nutrient media are used, you can simply generalize if you have a bacteria organized, for example, on Pirastonia, where a very specific semi-selective medium is used. And the performance of the laboratories for this specific combination of organism and medium could be extrapolated also on other media. So there are several considerations and restrictions on these, but they definitely need to be taken into account. I mean, it gives also possibilities, definitely, but I think this is not a very straightforward approach to follow. So the discussions we indicated are very well welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew.